Hello and welcome to Miniature Realms channel. I'm here with another painting tutorial. So a few weeks ago I started to delve pretty heavily into Warlord Games Epic Battles American Civil War. There's quite a few videos that I've posted up on the channel. Most of the videos at the moment are to do with this, or at least a large percentage of them are, and a lot of you seem to enjoy them. There's a tutorial for painting the Confederates. And today this is going to be all about painting the same miniatures but as Union troops. So if you want to if you haven't seen the Confederate video, it's worth probably watching that first, and there will be a couple of stages here that I skip. So you see these models already being primed, and they've been primed in a zenithal style. So they're black first, then grey, and there's a bit of a white dry brush on there. If you want to see me do that and talk a little bit more about that in detail, head over and have a look at the Confederate painting tutorial, even if you just stop it after that initial first few minutes. But we're going to start with them at this stage already, rather than repeating that process. I wasn't going to video it again, and I don't think anyone wants to see the same part of the video replayed into this. So I was going to pop my a little image of the notes that I take for the colours that I've used. I've already painted some of these stands before. I've shared them on my social media. I think there's been a video in one of my ACW vlogs showing a painted standoff, but this is really just sort of take you through the process. It is very much a tabletop process. The zenithal highlight is there to provide a lot of the shade and the highlights already, so when I paint over the top, I don't have to do anywhere near as much in the way of highlighting. It's the last thing you want to do with these little tiny 13.5mm models, and I will be using almost entirely contrast paints apart from metallics. So what I'm going to start with is the Citadel Contrast Talassar Blue. And this is what I'll be using on the trousers. So on the Confederate troops, I use these on some of the trousers, but not all. For the Union troops, pretty much all the trousers all the way across. At least I definitely will be on these stands. I might in the future I may make the odd pair of trousers slightly different. So, and I'm leaning around my camera at the moment, which makes it a little bit tricky to paint. But so we're literally slopping it on. You want to have enough paint with contrast on your brush so that it runs into the crevices and creates that natural shadow for you. That, along with the zenithal prime, will do that job for you. If you paint on too thinly, it becomes very much just a very thin glaze. I'll try and keep this in the middle of shot for you, and hopefully it will stay in focus. I will speed up quite a lot of parts of this video in order to keep it shorter. I think the last tutorial was about 45 minutes, so I want to make this one a little bit shorter. That's your blue on a pair of trousers. You'll see they already seeing that bit of natural highlight, but what I do is I clean my brush and just try and take some of it back off again. Probably easier to do that when it's a little bit wetter rather than all the way around. So we've gone to the second man. There you go, just to demonstrate what I was just saying. Clean brush, just take a little bit back off the top, just helps that reinforce that highlight. So I'm using a Redgrass Games paint handle. I've used quite a few things. This is my favourite. It's some orange tack, which is like extra sticky blue tack on the top. And it turns just by the thumb. It's a very smooth action as well. It's hard to describe, but it's almost, you can feel like it's maybe greased inside, so it's not a clunky. It does sometimes go around by itself as well if you've got a heavier model on one end. So you have to hold your thumb in place, but I find it really, really handy. And those of you who watch my videos would have seen I use it when I'm showing off models I've painted as well. It's like a little manual turntable. Definitely recommend it. Comes with a magnetic bottom, and a couple of magnetic discs, self-adhesive discs, so you can kind of have a place where you can safely store it without knocking it over. So if you've got a delicate model on top, I've used one so far on the corner of my wet palette lid. Generally, if I'm not painting, I put the lid back on, and then I can just clip this on the corner and keep a model on there, knowing that if and when the cat climbs across my desk when I'm not there, it's not going to knock anything over and break it. Anyway, I've done 3 there now. I'm not going to talk you through doing the rest. I'm going to speed up the camera as I want to do it. There we are. That's the blue trousers done. Now I will probably come back and do a tiny little highlight on those later, but you really don't need to. So for the next part, it will be the jackets and some of the hats. Now I use a bit of a mix. I couldn't find a single colour, a contrast colour that I wanted to do. And this was the biggest headache, really. I was just being happy with the darker blue coats. Some contrast colours are just fantastic. They go over the pre-shades, fantastic. Some are good, but they just don't provide that kind of wow, job done moment kind of feel. So I played around a little bit, and so I'm mixing Talassar blue, which is you've just seen for the trousers, and that just brings a little bit of extra richness to it. But Leviathan blue, and then black Templar, all of them are contrast colours, and then water as well. So it's 30, 30, 30, 30 mix of each of those, and 10 on water. And I've made myself a little pot of it. I say a little pot of it, a full pot of it. And no doubt I'll have to make more in the future. But now it's pretty much cracking on with the hats and the jackets, and this takes quite a while. So I'll start off, I'll do a couple, and then like the last stage I will just speed up and fire ahead. So I think it goes over quite nicely. It just shows the importance here of that pre-shade and the little dry brush. You can see where the natural highlights going on there because of it. And this is the goal really with this scale of miniature, is to save that time having to go back and do it all afterwards. Saying that, probably more so on the Union than I have on the Confederates. I have gone back and done little touch up with highlights, but again it's very much an optional part of the process, which you'll see later. Now I'm trying to miss as many of the straps, so the webbing, the bottle straps, the weapons, and everything else as possible. Yes, I can, you're painting some of these things a darker colour, so if you're painting them blacks, you think it doesn't matter too much, but the way contrast works, it works its best over a prepared base, which is the pre-shade in this example. So anything I do spill over on, I go back and touch up with grey, and we'll show that process when we get to it. But I just thought I wanted to mention that I am taking my time trying not to get it where it shouldn't go. It's impossible when it's this small, and even harder when you're leaning around a camera that's in front of you. I'm not pulling this up. My muscle memory is screaming get closer to the model, put your head closer to the model and do that. So, but I will fight it so I don't headbutt the camera, and so that I can show you guys what I'm doing. I think with the contrast one, it took me about 3 hours to paint and film, let alone the editing on top. And I can probably do one of these stands in an hour. So it just sort of shows you the extra time it takes to do things in a strange position. But I'll do a couple and then I'll speed it up a little bit. And I may even treat myself to doing the last couple on the stand off camera. Okay, so we're back after the blue coats have gone on. It gets quite messy at times. So now I'm going to use some Citadel Grey Sear base, and I've thinned this quite a lot. It's a good colour, but it's very typical with GW stuff, especially base painting, extremely thick. And it was one of the ones that was recommended or designed on release to be used with contrast. That's not why I'm using it as such, I just find it works quite well for these things. But what I'm going to do now is go back and basically tidy up where I didn't want to get the blue. I do this a couple of stages. Sometimes just touch up the odd bit of the face of beard as well, just to make sure that they really take the contrast well. But mostly I'm tidying up belts, webbing and things that I got blue on that won't have the full effect when I then move on to add the contrast Talassar black. The black would just go over it, but there's a danger when you're painting blues and blacks together that they kind of blend into each other. I think navy blue and black are two colours that probably should never be seen together. You wouldn't wear clothes of those colours. It look awful. It doesn't really help from a model point of view and in terms of colour choice. If I was looking at the colour wheel and I was choosing colours to paint a miniature based on what's complementary and what looks good together, I wouldn't pick navy blue or a dark blue and black. It'd just be the opposite of what I want to do. But obviously these are historical miniatures to a degree. I know there's some debate about how historically accurate a lot of it is. I'm not going to get into that here, but either way, the blue and the black can be problematic painting them together, and you do lose a little bit of definition. So I want to make sure that when I do paint them, that the way I paint them gives as much definition as I possibly can. And then I'll break up the colours in other ways using my choices of colours of beards and hair and the odd bedroll and things, but we'll come on to that a little bit later. So like before, I'll speed up the camera a bit in a second and then come back to you all when we're ready to do the next stage. you join me back, I've just filled out all the grey bits and tidied it all up. I'm just putting some contrast Blood Angels red on the officer's sash. You need to use this red for a tiny little bit, so I thought I'd get it out of the way now. And the other thing I'm going to use it for is pick out one of the bedrolls. Now the debates on whether how many Union soldiers would have bedrolls, etc. Anyway, but there's a nice picture in one of the Osprey books where a Union soldier's got a nice red bedroll, and all I'm doing is kind of one on every strip, maybe some strips without. Otherwise I'll have two to a stand. That might be too many. I think I have done one on the rear rank that I've already painted for this stand. Try not to go over the board with it, but it's definitely not a typical, but people bring their own stuff, people lose stuff, pick up stuff, and it's just a way of adding a little bit of colour. So I talked already about the problems with blue and black, and how potentially dull these stands could look, and just a little spot colour there helps. I've also added Talassar blue to the recesses of the body of the drum there. It's the same as that's on the trousers. I did that before I remembered to press record on the camera, which is often handy for a tutorial. So I've added that colour in, and that's it now. I'm not going to add any more sort of different bright spot colours. The rest I'll do through the flesh and through the beards and things. Now the next stage, which is the second most boring stage after the stage doing the blue coats, I think, is contrast black Templar, and that's painting in the belt straps and things, and the boots, and the remaining hats. I'm going to do black on this. I think I'll do the odd one in brown or something like that. I think I have one on the back rank which is brown, just to add a bit of colour. So we will start with the black Templar. Again, I will speed it up so you're not watching every single last part of this. Starting with the boots. These are nice and quick to do. So with the webbing, stroke belts and things, a lot of the artwork I've found will show that the Union water bottle and its strap is white leather. I believe it's leather. I'm sure it's not very white looking after being on campaign. But what I'm going to do is highlight the grey that's already there to white. And the reason I'll do that, and you'll see it a bit later, the reason I do that is again because it breaks up that blue and black look to this scheme. Which I want to avoid being too much of the focus. Obviously I want them to look right, but I want to find some colour interest and things just to break that up a bit, so the red spot colour helps. A few sort of reds and oranges and blonde beards and things like that helps a little bit as well, even though you'll probably find the majority of people are going to have a dark head, but I think it just helps a little bit. So when I get around to doing these straps in a moment, anything that's got a water bottle at the bottom of it, so these sort of rounded ones, I leave the whole strap white, and it just helps break up that colour a little bit. Anyway, I will speed this up a bit, stop talking to you, and I'll come back to you when we're ready for the next stage. have the black webbing done. Tiny little bit of touch up here and there. Next stage is the Citadel colour. It's a shade. It's a Cryptek Armour Shade Gloss. And this I've never used before, the War Games Illustrated article, and they used them on the guns, and I thought, oh, I'll give that a go. And I think it works really well. I've not tried it over anything other than this kind of pre-shaded grey look, but basically just paint it over the whole guns. He says doing it off camera because I'm leaning around. Paint it over the whole weapon, and then I pick out the barrels afterwards in metallic, and that's the only metallic I use. So anyway, I'm going to crack on and add this on all the models, speed up as usual, and then come back and speak to you when we do the next stage. Okay, so next stage, the flesh. So Dark Oath, that's a contrast colour, so Dark Oath flesh. Again, I want this to kind of run in the recesses. I'm not worried about too much about beards at the moment, though I will try and keep it off the majority of the beard, but I will go back and do one of my little grey touch-ups again before I add in the beards. You could probably just skip doing the hair and just whack this over the whole lot. They, you know, from the scale of these miniatures and the way they're going to be used on the table, especially when people are going to have thousands and thousands of them, then there's a very, very strong argument for not worrying about that too much. But hey ho, I think I'm going to have it would be 17 sprues of just the plastics each side if I split it 50-50. And then wave 2 and wave 3 when they arrive. So at the time we're recording, they're not here yet. It's April 2021. And I won't be using the recommended number of stands per regiment that Warlord have said. Like a lot of the community kind of defaulted to smaller numbers just because of the frontage issues that are using their standards cost, of course. Anyway, I will speed this up and finish these off. I've noticed the hand that I've got to touch up with grey sear before I go back, so I'll come back to you in a few moments. So that's the Dark Oath flesh on. I'm going to do two things now. I'm going to put a tiny bit of skeleton Horde on the top of the drum. This is going to be tidied up afterwards, so a little bit on the top there, that's all it needs. And then I'm going to go and just touch up any beards and tashes and things that I've got too much of the flesh on, so that they take the contrast well for beard, the hair colouring. Like I said, not essential, but it just really helps. And then, Oh, I just added that skeleton horde. That will be dry now. Contrast dries pretty quickly. So I'm just going to touch up the rim along there. I've just spotted one hand that's not been painted flesh, and is the one I have to go back in and touch up. So little drummer boy, but he's got a beard, so not much of a boy. Okay. So we are now on to the stage of hair, and I do a bit of a mix of different hair colours. I've used mostly Nazdrag yellow, Agarush dunes, Gorgunter fir, and wildwood on these. Try to stay away from the black, so where I'd use black hair I've gone for the wildwood. So it's just a bit of a mix now really. So play around and go for what you want. Okay, back again. So we are on to the final few stages now, I believe. Now, on the top of the officer's jacket are the little bars. They denotes their rank. Now, I appreciate that on the real ones that they would have been sort of some colour braiding on a field of blue or black or something. Far too small. So in many ways leaving it a dark colour would maybe be more realistic, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go and actually put some contrast cyan and yellow on, just something to make it sort of stand out a little bit at this scale. Like I said, more colour interest. He's got the one on his back shoulder, which is obviously at a funny angle because his arm is raised. And as I'm doing that, I'm realising I haven't painted the back of his hand. So I'll quickly grab the Dark Oath flesh. Just get that added in there. Okay, next stage is to tidy up a few things. I'm going to use some Blood Angels Red contrast paint and just do the edge of the drum. So there's lots of these little tiny little bits you only do occasionally. I could have done that when I did the other red, but I wanted to tidy it up and do the skeleton horde on the top of it first, because the red almost tidies it. And now on the same on the bottom. Yeah, nothing much, just gives it a little bit of colour. Now the next main thing on the larger area is going to be just some model colour off-white. Just want to touch up the webbing, the tiny little bits of webbing, so they're basically water bottles. And I've also left their bedrolls greyish white, apart from the one that I did red. I just want to touch them up again. It's just to make them stand out a little bit more on the models at this scale. I appreciate the grey was probably a more realistic colour, so I'm not exactly painting them white, so to speak. What I'm doing is making sure that they just stand out and pop a little bit. So I'm just going to go around, and any bits I've left white for any reason, unless it's by mistake, just touch up, and I just think that that really makes the unit stand out a little bit more. And as I do it, I'll go around and find mistakes just like I have here. I'll get back to it in a minute. Missing a hand I've not done flesh on. I'll wait till I've gone around and done all the whites. So that's the front. Less on these than there was on the back rank, so less of these water bottles, water canteens, sorry. It's just adding a little bit of colour interest. I say colour. Oh, it's not really a colour. Right. You don't have to paint in the whole thing white again. Essentially doing a highlight. It's quite a heavy one. Okay, next stage done. I am just going to grab that little bit of flesh I missed off, and then we're back. Then we're onto the metals. So I'll come back to you in a second. Okay, 2 metals. A scale 75 black metal, and then the highlight's going to be Game Air silver. I'm just putting little dots on, really, little strips where they appear not on the stock and in between the bands of the rifle. As we know from these poses, they're holding these guns all over the place. Some left shoulder, some right. That's not everyone's favourite thing. I quite like the jumbled up look, but I appreciate it. It seems a bit, they're not really marching to order. So I'm just going to work my way along. Remember to pick out the guards at the bottom of the trigger as well, and then I'll come back to you. So I picked up a few of the little Bowie knives and things like that as well. Now back with the Game Air silver, and then just find a little highlight, so not covering quite as much area. It does make a little bit of difference. Again, you really don't need to do this part. I just think it makes it pop a little bit more. Definitely stages of things that you really don't need to do. Necro gold. Okay, so I think I've got all the bits covered. Now, you can leave these at that. I personally don't think they look quite as good as the Confederates do left at this stage. I find that the blue blends a little bit. It was a very problem I had right at the beginning, and I wasn't 100% happy with the coat. So there's two things I did. One, add a little bit of highlight on the trousers just to help differentiate even more. And there's two colours you can use actually, both Scale 75 Fantasy Games ones. There's the Amarth Blue, and I haven't got a clue how to pronounce this. Sometimes you get the translation for the name, sometimes you seem to get the, I don't even think that's Spanish, to be honest with you. It's something turquoise, Jorilidin turquoise. Anyway, that will pop up on the screen anyway, so you can read it properly. But that's the one I'm going to use to just do a very faint highlight on the trousers. I'll make sure the paint's fairly thin, and you'll see what I do with it in a second. Very little difference. Just somewhere it's still a little bit too dark. I just wanted to add a slight highlight. Quite rough with it. Trying to work with the natural highlight that was already there, caused by the contrast, because this is probably a little bit darker in some ways, but you see like that drummer there, I left that a little bit too dark, and it just doesn't help when you're looking at the difference between the blue coats and the trousers. And I really wanted to just build a bit more colour difference in there, especially on the officer where you've got less leg showing, he's not showing his knee. So just a little bit. Maybe I've splashed the coat down on the bottoms and stuff as well, so it's not perfect. It could go lighter. I think that just adds a tiny bit of definition, and then flick them around on the other side and do the same thing on the back. So some are fine, some I just think they need a little bit more definition and tidy up. And then the final thing is using a little bit of this scale colour, Caspian blue, and this is what I've been using to just slightly highlight the jackets. Like I said, these last two stages, you really don't have to do them, but I was just a bit twitchy with how dull the natural highlights through the contrast was showing up compared to the way the Confederates looked. So you can just pick out a little bit. You can just see on the tops of the hats there. A little bit on the bottom of the jacket. Just the odd point, I'm not going over the whole thing. Just lifts the colour slightly. I'm trying to be quick as well, because that's the whole point of these, of using contrast on these models, is not getting down to the dirty of highlighting every single miniature. So I'm trying not to get caught into, because there's quite a lot of detail on these little models, trying not to get caught into the trap of going, well, I can see that line there, I could highlight that, I could highlight that. I'm just putting little bits on just to lift the colour slightly. And here we are, with a finished strip. I still think they look pretty messy like that. It's the final stages of when you base them and just brings it all together. It's much the same with any miniature, really. Now, I covered how I did the basing on the Confederate tutorial, so I'm not going to record myself doing that again now. But I will pop a little image on the screen now with a list of all the things I used, and I'll briefly talk you through them when I pop on a here's one I made earlier, real Blue Peter reference there, so apologies to anyone from of international climes or of an age that you aren't aware of Blue Peter, but here we go. So I paint the whole base of the model, including the strips around the feet, in scale 75 petroleum grey. I then use a little bit of Vallejo earth texture, dark earth, to smooth over from the edges of the base and to kind of add a little bit of texture but not too thick all over, and then use Agrax Earth Shade, trusty old wash, let that dry. Once it's dry, I use a little bit of Vallejo pigments, light senna, and that kind of really dries it out and makes it look more realistic rather than kind of something with a wash. Wash just has a certain look to it. You can tell it's a wash unless you do more stuff afterwards, I believe. And then I add a few splotches of Vallejo thick mud, European mud, and that's these very light little bits you put in there, just adds a little bit of variation and texture. And then from War Paint Figures, my favourite new tough manufacturer, I've been using these 2mm tufts, and these are Winter and Dead Grass, I believe. So same process with the Confederates. If you actually want to see me do that and go through the process of doing it, if you watch the Confederate tutorial, the end of that video is me doing that. And much as the same as with this video, I missed off the example, the live example of doing the Zenithal highlight with the airbrush. But anyway, I'll pop a picture up of these ones, or the ones I did before now, again for those of you who haven't seen the social media posts or the vlog post, but hopefully you find it useful. As I said, it's supposed to be a tabletop army. I'm trying to use contrast to speed up the process. There are things there that I'm doing, slowing myself back down again, because the models are so well detailed, but they are very, very basic. You can see that that's a pretty rough paint job if you zoom in close on that, but the overall effect I think is quite pleasing, especially when they're all based. So thanks for watching, hope you found it useful, and tune in and subscribe for more. And I don't know what's coming next. There will definitely be lots more painting tutorials, probably for different scales as well, but there'll be lots more epic ACW coverage, as long as with other historical Black Pounder stuff as well. So stay in touch, subscribe, and I'll catch you soon.